Hey guys, welcome to Overheard. Thank you so much for coming. I'm here today with Garrett from the Sheckies and Ben from the Paper Army, both longtime musicians and Nirvana fans. And yeah, it's going to be really fun to chat today. Garrett, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I love music. Um, Got to be immersed in it, or life just isn't right. um, I play punk rock. I'm a guitarist primarily, and I got into playing music because of Nirvana. Um, Made me want to start a band, made me want to play guitar, and 30 years later, still doing it. Nothing's changed. I love it. And,
Was Nirvana your first was that the first punk band you'd heard or?
um, yeah, I'd say so. I was 12.
Yeah,
And a friend had Nevermind on cassette. I heard that, and off I went.
that's amazing. And you went deeper down the rabbit hole.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Ben, sorry, that was perfect timing.
Oh, with the call, yeah. So yeah, no, I'm currently playing in two bands, one called The Goddamn Rights, which is it's the whole thing. Noise rock. It's fun. And the Paper Army,
Nice.
like you mentioned. And God, I think the first Nirvana was not what got me into punk. Mine was sort of an accident. A friend made a mixtape. I had a bunch of bands that I didn't even know who they were. And now I know that it was mostly like Minor Threat and Dead Kennedys. But after I heard, whenever that Smells Like Teen Spirit and Even in His Youth single came out, which I still have that cassette,
Nice.
when I heard Even in His Youth, I was like, holy shit, like this, sorry, can I do that? Is
Oh
that
yeah,
cool? Okay, I
totally
was
fine.
like,
Yeah.
dude, oh my God,
Yes,
this is
totally
what I want.
fine.
Like this kind of stuff is so raw and it's so, whatever. That's when it's like, I'm gonna start a band at like 8 years old or nine or something, which I couldn't because people don't play instruments well when you're eight. So that
Um, that's amazing. And so that was so both of you, how did you kind of end up into the like Lookout Records sort of, punk rock local 27 um scene from Nirvana? Because of course you're talking about a completely different way of like the grunge scene in the Pacific Northwest. And then it looks like you both kind of gravitated to the San Francisco, like to the Bay Area punk. Garrett, how did you kind of move to that?
Right. So I got into the whole grunge scene and stuff, and then around '95, a friend of mine that I grew up with, he moved to Pittsburgh from Delaware, and someone that he had befriended uh, got him into the Queers, Future Legal, Ramones. And at that point, I was kind of like looking for a transition, where to move forward musically. Um, and I'd gotten a mixtape from him, and kind of stayed in that genre, you know, even today, still kind of pigeonholed in that, as far as style of music I like to play. And yeah, it was a good transition getting more into like the pop punk scene, punk rock. It just made sense. And,
It's funny how the Ramones in the 70s were like cruising through everybody's towns, making everybody want to start a band, and that's still happening today.
right.
It's amazing. Ben, what about you?
1995. Uh, Queers came through. God, I don't even remember where, because it's a super small, like Birmingham is just small. Um, and I think in 95 they came to some venue. I don't remember what it was. Um, and the first time I saw them, I was like, this is incredible. Like the Queers. Sorry, I just started that off.
No,
Like
you
like
said
you
the
guys
Queers.
knew. Oh, I did?
You did. Yeah, you're good.
Wow, look at me
Yeah.
go. I'm
No, you're
doing
good.
things. So yeah, I saw them completely blown away because they weren't taking things seriously. You know, the whole that whole grunge thing for a while was so serious and so deep and kind of like
Right.
personal and a little more angry. But then here was this band just like, just kind of joking around about dumb stuff. And I was like, oh, this is way more lighthearted. And after that, I heard Screeching Weasel. And that everything after that, it was like, I just want to be like Ben Weasel, except for a thing that he did that we're not going to talk about. But yeah, that was kind of it. And then um Groovy Ghoulies, I remember them coming through and hanging out with Kepi, and he was just the nicest guy in the
He's the
world. And I was like,
sweetest.
God, they're all so cool. And since then, I've probably harassed Joe more. I don't know how many times we played with them, but I harassed Joe more than anybody on the planet. I'm like a puppy. I'm like, hey Joe, what are you doing? And
Mhm.
you know, I don't know, it was weird. It was just it was a nice departure, I think, from because after the thing with Kurt, it was just like, what now? Like, what do you do? Um, and so
Yeah.
that was just another scene to go to and kind of, I don't know.
Totally. When did you like Garrett, what was your first band that you played in? How old were you when you were like, okay, like I'm taking this to the streets. Let's like actually go and make some music.
My first band called Hedonist, and started that in '95.
Oh wow.
That went on until late '98. Then it fell apart. And it was grunge straight up. A lot of that stuff didn't get recorded, and I'm in the process of demoing a lot of that stuff out because I've been playing a lot of that stuff lately, and it's still relevant sounding to me, and it's fun to play. So I recorded a full length record of that stuff, resurrect that, and add some music to it as well. I'm pretty excited about that.
That's awesome. And Ben, what about you? How old were you when you were like, okay, I'm like doing this?
God. I think I wrote my first song when I was 12,
Oh wow.
and it was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. And I still remember it. But I think it was 96 when Matt Heath that I told you about, he and I and my friend Jeff, who has passed away, and this guy Josh, we started a band. We could not think of a name at all, so we just settled on the Fuckers. It was
Nice.
Brilliant.
awful. It was so bad. We were like the drummer could not keep time
Oh my
at
God.
all. We couldn't figure out who was gonna sing. Like Matt would be like, "Oh, you should do it." I'm like, "No, no, you should do it." And so we just played a lot of little shows with no vocals at all. It was so embarrassing, but it was fun. It was
And is there video of that?
no,
There's
thank
that
God,
kick.
no.
Well, we'll use our imaginations. It's good.
Oh, that was-
So, being in the music scene, I always kind of, I have a lot of music friends too. And so I like to ask them, like, at what point did you kind of figure out something's wrong with what we're being told about what happened to Kurt? So, Garrett, Ben, like, I know you've both kind of thought about this for a long time. Garrett, what was the point where you're like, this isn't right, something is not right about what happened to Kurt?
It just didn't seem right from the beginning to me, and
Even as a kid?
yeah,
Yeah.
it was really devastating to hear about. Um, it just never sat right with me. And as time went on, just tried to piece things together and find out a little bit about it. And just the more I heard, started making sense that something wasn't right.
Yeah. And so now, I mean, you and I have
The
talked a lot
internet
about the,
helped.
pardon?
The internet,
Yeah,
late '90s, that helped. You know,
a lot
definitely.
easier to research. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you and I have talked a lot about the forensics and stuff now. And so what percentage are you convinced that Kurt didn't take his own life?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, yeah, me too. And Ben, what about you? When did you go like, shit, there's something like really wrong with this narrative we're being fed?
I the moment that kind of when Hole did the unplugged thing, there was something about her attitude through that whole thing. I'm not going to call anybody else specifically, but
Mhm.
it just seemed really inappropriate, I guess. And with her playing a Nirvana song that we hadn't heard and just her demeanor the entire time. And I was like, how can you be this, jovial? How can you be this, whatever when this is going on? And then Tom Grant started um or I think he started posting some of his, he had a website at some point. He was on AOL and I was there, found him and I was writing him back and forth every day almost just about stuff. And he would send me things and then he had the website. I printed every bit of it out. My poor printer was probably hated, like hateful towards me forever, but printed all of it out and I would just pour over it all the time. And I'm like, kind of felt vindicated in a way because the whole time I thought, well, this guy has everything. I mean, everything that you would think that a human being would need to stay happy. Like, well, why do this? And like I told you before, like if he has all of this and he can't handle it, then what chance do I stand? And and then after reading all that, I just got angrier, like, and then some things happened later in life that kind of, you meet people. Music world's really small, so you meet people and you talk to people and they kind of tell you some things and they confirm some of your doubts and some of your questions and that there hasn't been a doubt since. I mean, um, still makes me angry to this day though. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I know I'll send you something and you'll be like, well, fuck that. Like, it's just
that's
like I
what I
know
mean.
it's yeah, and I mean it's really hard to, like we've all gone over the autopsy and going over all that stuff and separating like what you're reading from this person that you have this great affection for. It's really tough sometimes to like, to look at it from like a scientific or pseudoscientific point of view and then remember that you're talking about this human that has, done so much for music and done all of this. Garrett, did you ever feel like the way Ben was saying, kind of, I'm not saying suicidal, but going like, well, shit, if Kurt couldn't hack it with everything that he had and his musical gifts, you know, like, did you ever feel like that growing up? Because you were obviously like quite young when that happened.
I mean, I never felt suicidal or anything like that, but I was really upset for a long time.
Yeah.
But, I was, just all excited about getting into music and stuff. And I was hoping I was going to get to see them live. And fortunately, that never happened.
Yeah. Was there any close calls that Ben, you were gonna go see them, right? At some point, I think. And then what happened?
Yeah. Well, so they came through here December. It was in December of 93. And I had a handful of friends that were going to go. We were all going to pile in this van and go downtown and see them. I don't think that they had played in Alabama the entire time they were a band. I could be wrong, but I don't think they had ever come through Alabama until this one time. And I got in trouble at school and I got grounded. And so I told my mom, I was like, look, you do whatever you want. You can ground me forever. Just like let me go and see them this one time. And she was like, and I never let her live this down. I was like, she told me, no, you got in trouble at school, you're grounded, whatever. You can go see them next year. And I was just like, oh, this sucks, this. And then it happened, and my mom came in the day that it was on the news. She came in because I didn't know, and she came in and she was like, "I'm so sorry." And I'm like, "No, what? What are you talk? what are you sorry for? What? And like even she was upset. She was crying and she was like, I'm so sorry. I should have let you go. And I was like, oh God, what's going, and but yeah, I could have. Thanks, Mom. I'm just kidding. I was a brat. I
Uh,
deserved it. I got in trouble, so
did you have any close calls, Garrett, where you could have seen them and didn't go?
My friend Brendan that showed me the mixtape of the Queens and all that. He was going to go see him in Pittsburgh, but I wasn't able to get out to Pittsburgh to go see it with him. And I was just hoping that I was going to be able to catch him on the next one and
Mm.
wasn't expecting that to go down.
Yeah. I remember because I'm older than both of you, but so Nirvana played in my local place in Canada. And it was April, but like it's really like legit cold still where I'm from in Canada. I don't live there anymore, but anyways, for obvious reasons. And so my boss said that Kurt, because I worked there a few years later, and so he said that Kurt was like there. He was really nice, but he just like sat in the corner. He was like freezing. And I think maybe like 15 people showed up for the show. And this was April of 91. And so he was just like, bumming like cigarettes off the crowd and just like really interactive. And oh my God, I wish that I mean, I wasn't cool enough to go at that point. I don't think I got into punk until 94. And so I wasn't cool enough or old enough to go. But yeah, I mean, what an amazing show. Would have been really great if someone had filmed it, but I mean, it could show up, could be in someone's attic somewhere, one of those like 15 people, but
Bathroom.
yeah, exactly. Garrett, you have a few stories that you kind of have secondhand from friends of yours who've met Kurt. Do you want to share any of those?
Yeah, I can see it. So my friend Brian, he worked for the stagehand union, um, doing lighting and whatever needed to be done. Lighting more than anything, and did a lot of that in Chicago. And saw Nirvana at a couple shows and worked 5 or 6 shows. I think it was like around 9 shows altogether. He taught on the Euro tour '93. And, at the Aragon Ballroom in Chicago. He likes to, he did like to collect stuff, autograph pictures, that kind of thing was looked down upon, but he's a collector and he just enjoyed doing it. And he caught up with Kurt in Chicago at the Aragon, and he was very cool. Signed a couple things for him, and then he approached. They did 2 shows at the Aragon. Second show, he ended up catching up with him again, and he was sitting there at some little round coffee table thing. And it was just Kurt sitting there, and he comes up and he has a CD, and he's like, "Hey, Kurt, can you sign this?" And Kurt's sitting there, and he just looks up at him, and he goes, "Why?" Because apparently he signed a few things for him last show. And he's like, "Man, I felt like such a heel." But then he signed it, and it was all good. But everything I've ever heard about people that have met him and stuff, he's always been really good about stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he was, I think he genuinely loved anybody who loved music. I think he genuinely loved them. So yeah, that's awesome. Um, and did you have another story?
Um,
That was it. Okay.
yeah,
I guess I think the story was so cute that I just remembered it twice. So, um, and then, Ben, you kind of know a lot of people like in the music industry and you've heard some Some stuff. You have did you know somebody who knew Dylan, or was there a story you wanted to kind of moving from like a cute kind of Kurt story to, where we're talking about what happened to Kurt, and I think, this kind of goes along with what Joe Burns said happened to Kurt the night he died.
Yeah, God, I'm still sort of hesitant to, should I just tell the whole backstory about Tom and everything? I don't want to call any,
Yeah, please tell the story about Tom because yeah.
well, that's kind of how it all started was, it's like I've said a million times, like the music world is super small. So, one of my best friends who passed away, excuse me, the story sucks so much. One of my friends but he was in one of my favorite bands ever. And one of his friends that I'm not going to mention, um, kind of dragged me out one night to go and see Earth. I was never a fan of Earth. I didn't get it. I don't want to be that guy, but if I was going to listen to something that was sludgier, then I would go with some of the Southern stuff, like I Hate God or something. And it was different. I was like, "Oh, I don't really want to be here." Um, the mention of, so Matt mentioned Kurt one time, just because, Matt and I had been friends forever. And I mean, Matt was one of those people that his entire, like, and there was no, you couldn't see his wall. There was just nothing but Nirvana stuff everywhere. So, and he was curious. He's like, "Oh, this is Kurt's best friend. I'm going to ask him what he was like." And so he asked him, and Dylan really didn't care much to talk about it. He might have thrown a little fit and stormed off and went to the van to, to do his stuff with Matt's other friend, and came back and was a lot more polite, I guess, at least. And he just sort of started talking about all of these things. He mentioned so many weird things about being in that house around the time that Kurt died. Um, and some of the things that he mentioned, like in passing, you're kind of like, "Well, this is weird." It's almost like he's having a conversation with himself. Like, I don't know who all these people are that he's talking about. And I think I told you the same thing, Garrett, like at the show that we did, where it's just like rambling on. The only thing that I remembered from all of it was him mentioning something about, well, he said that Kurt was in a great mood. He said that he was happy, and the only thing that
This is the
was
night he
off,
died, Ben.
not the night that he died, just
Oh,
him
when he
being
came
in the
back
house
from
during that period.
Exodus.
Yeah. So, but he named a bunch of people that were in the house. Didn't mean anything to me because I didn't know any of them. And he said something about Kurt being tired of babysitting, whatever the hell that meant. I still don't know. And so he's just kind of rambling on and just kind of filed it away. I was like, that's just Dylan. He's just doing whatever. But somehow in the group with Tom Grant, I don't remember what it was called. Um, Somebody asked about Dylan, about whether or not he was in the house. And I think Tom sort of matter of factly was like, "No, Dylan wasn't there." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, he was. I mean, unless he just wanted to lie about it." So I commented, and Tom said, "Message me." Like we were already friends on Facebook. And so he's like, "I need you to tell me what you're talking about." And so I tell him the whole story. And rather than listening to anything that I said, respectfully, I'm sure he's going to watch this and whatever, but he clearly didn't read everything I said. I didn't say that Dylan was there the night Kurt died. All I said was that Dylan was talking about everybody in the house, and he mentioned Bonnie, and I had no idea who the hell Bonnie was. But that name stuck to me because it didn't sound like the name of a person that would be hanging out in a rock star's house. You know what I mean? It kind of sounded like an older person or whatever. I'm like, "That's
Like
weird," but
Ethel or something.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
like, "Oh, Margaret was over there too." It's like, well, who the fuck? So, So I told Tom about it, and his exact words were, I believe that you believe Dylan said this. And I was like, Sir, respectfully, don't do that. Don't call me a liar. Like, and you're the one that asked for it anyway. You wanted to know, and now you're telling me it was this weird gaslighting thing. Like, you didn't hear that, or Dylan didn't say it. And I'm like, well, he did. And I can tell, like, I have proof. I tell him, like, I've got pictures from that night. I have, and he was so matter of fact about, well, I can prove that he wasn't there. And I'm like, okay, well, how? I mean, then do it. I'm sorry if I'm mistaken. Then not about the story, but about Dylan being in the house, then prove it. And he got defensive instead. Um, and that just seemed really weird to me. Because I can't think of any reason why Dylan would just flatly lie about something like that to, I would say strangers, but this was one of his friends. So,
I
um,
think to the babysitting thing, I feel like since, Bonnie was 19 and I think a lot of the people that were there were a lot younger and less mature than Kurt. So that probably, makes a lot of sense. Callie's 20
mm,
years old, Courtney's ex-boyfriend. And
God,
so, which is so bizarre. But yeah, so I think that that makes sense. And the strange thing again about Tom is just like for him to say he knows Dylan wasn't there, Dylan wasn't at the house from the 2nd to the 5th. Like, how do you
yeah,
know Dylan's whereabouts for 3 days, every minute of every day? He has a very strange, he's always standing up for Dylan, always says Dylan, was not the person, he wasn't the guy, he's a good guy.
he's well
From,
read.
yeah, yeah, he's
Sorry.
smart, um, you mean Dylan?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah.
he's read a lot of books.
Oh,
So
okay. Right. Okay. And interpretive, like, do you think he gets, like if we're talking about Come As You Are, if that's about Dylan, he knows not what it means. Do you think that we kind of talk about like interpreting lyrics? Do you think that that is actually a dig at Dylan or?
I mean, as a not that I'm a great lyricist or anything, but there are a lot of times when I will kind of because there are some things you just don't always feel comfortable saying to somebody directly. So there are some times where I'll take little shots and I'll be vague, which is childish, I know, but I mean, none of the chorus of In Bloom sounds
Yeah, why did I say Come As You Are? Sorry.
oh no, I knew what you meant. It's okay.
Yeah,
No,
sorry.
um none of it sounds really complimentary of Dylan. That I mean, it sounds like he's essentially calling him just like a Klingon and somebody who just doesn't get it. Um, but that's just me. I could take those lyrics apart all day long, but um, I don't. That's the thing I don't understand is where did this was Kurt's best friend thing come from? Like it seemed like it spawned after his death when I don't recall ever. I mean, there were some pictures of them together, obviously, but I don't know about the best friend thing. I don't
Well,
know.
normally your best friend doesn't kill you. I think,
There's
there's
that.
that. There's,
Yeah.
that's a part of it. We're talking about lyrics. Garrett, did you ever think, how people are like, well, Kurt was really depressed because he wrote about guns and suicide. And as somebody, of our generation or who listens to a lot of like punk, it's like, are you kidding? Like he talked about suicide less than like really poppy punk bands like Green Day talks about it at least like 14 times. Blink, Smashing Pumpkins Today is about suicide. So was that ever, I'm sure you've heard that argument before. Well, I think Kurt was depressed because his music, well, he didn't write them on major chords, like he was doing minor chord music mostly. So is that something that you've like have you dug into Kurt's lyrics and
I
made that
mean,
assessment?
I never bought that uh, from listening to his lyrics. I just, whatever he would say about writing lyrics, how he did it, I take it as just uh, being artistic. Um, and from what he said, a lot of lyrics were taken from poetry and just kind of favorite lines. And once you got into In Utero, the lyrics were not as just artistic. It was more telling a story about things. Um, personally, like Servant Servants, talking about the divorce of his parents. But yeah, I never uh, thought that just anything that he wrote lyrically that came off of me like, oh, this guy's suicidal, depressed. That never spoke to me like that.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you, Ben?
No, I mean, as somebody who, I mean, he said himself that the music was always first and lyrics were secondary. And you can kind of, I'm sure there are some people who are, well, that are much better writers than I am that will comment on this and whatever. But as somebody who writes a lot of songs all the time, uh, a lot of times you have this idea in your head of how things should go. And so you'll have like, for instance, like you might have just the chorus that kind of pops in your head and it just loops and you don't have the words for it, but you know the sounds of the words and how they're supposed to be. So you can like you don't want certain syllables that are too harsh in certain parts or whatever. And so it kind of works itself out in your head. So there are sometimes you'll sift through old things that you've written to see if maybe they'll fit in there, or you might just go, I'll just write, kind of whatever and try to make it fit to try to make a lot of it has to do with like syllable placement and where it goes and like when to add softer parts. And it just seems like he was honestly just the lyrics were nothing more than like an extra instrument in a way. They fit so perfectly in the songs. There are only a few examples of any that I've heard that it's like I probably would have changed this word, which is that sounds arrogant. Like, oh, I would have changed Kurt's lyrics, but no, but I mean with some of the how they sound like phonetically, it's like it just honestly seems like he was just saying like I mean, I think he wrote the lyrics to like on a plane, like in the studio. And I mean, by his own admission, they didn't really mean anything. So you can tell how much he really put into it. Um, and never mind, to me, they weren't, I'm not saying they weren't good, but they were more like playful. These fit the songs. But with In Utero, it seemed like he thought a lot more stuff out and he was using more. Um, it was definitely themed for the most part, except for some of the older ones. And even in songs like All Apologies, like everybody's like, oh, it's such a sad song. It's about, this and that. It's like, no, it's not. Those words just fit. If you swap them out, they don't really flow that well. And Penny Royalty is absolutely brilliant, but it's almost more of I don't want to say making fun of himself, but kind of mocking the situation he's in. And everybody just took it so seriously. I mean, who else would write, I'm on warm milk and laxatives? You know what I mean? Like he'd gone through all the stuff with his stomach and, he was just being honest in a kind of, look, this is ridiculous kind of way to me. Um, I've never taken anything that he ever there. I can't think of a single line where I'm like, oh, that sounds rough. I mean, I've got more that sounds suicidal than any Nirvana song. So no, no, there's nothing in there about that to me.
Totally agree. And I think a lot of people, they don't understand his sense of humor as well. It's a very, I mean, it's just ridiculous to, the whole I hate myself and I want to die shirt and all of that. Like that's, like I remember when Green Day did. I think it was like Woodstock or Lollapalooza, and he's wearing like a shirt that says stupid with like the arrow pointing up at his face. It's like, guys, it's a joke. Like, but now people would be like, oh my God, that poor guy. Oh, Billy Joe thinks he's stupid. We feel bad for him. It's this very
Hmm.
bizarre thing now with people. So it's kind of hard to explain to people. But do you kind of uh, you know, interpret his lyrics too, Garrett? Like, are you always listening and like again going with like In Utero, Penny Royalty, we're talking about like like an old-timey sort of folk remedy for abortion and stuff, or are you always kind of going through his lyrics and coming up with interesting interpretations?
I mean, I just felt like I could relate.
Yeah.
Whatever was going on, whatever with Nirvana's music, uh, felt like it was something I was looking for, and just felt like I could relate. And um,
Yeah, totally. And so then you both obviously, gravitated towards guitar and well, you're not the lead singer, Garrett, right? Um have you ever been
well,
lead?
yeah, I have.
Yeah, okay.
I'm gonna be doing lead in this and other album.
Cool. And so you know, at what point too did you kind of go, did you feel like did you ever play grunge? Like were any of your
Absolutely.
bands? Oh, you did. Okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
Hedonist
sorry, your first
was,
band was a little bit grunge,
yeah,
right? Yeah, okay.
oh, it was 100% grunge.
Oh, okay, right. And so do you like other grunge bands like, Mudhoney and
Oh yeah.
yeah, so you like lots of stuff in the Seattle scene. Yeah, okay. And what about you, Ben? Do you like any other grunge or is that?
Oh yeah. Like
Oh,
I
okay.
to this day I still like I was just listening to Girl Trouble a couple of days ago. I was like, I forgot how good they were. Flop was horribly underrated. Flop was so good. I know that didn't really fit into the grunge thing, but the U-Men, I thought that the U-Men were one of the best bands that came out of there. That's my opinion. But love the U-Men. Love them so much. So many good ones. Like there's a Dead Moon record over there. God, there's so many good bands. Mudhoney was obviously like a favorite because, it was Mudhoney, but even though Mark was kind of a dick.
Garrett, when you heard Joe's statement about what happened to Kurt, did that ring true to you? Where you're like, yeah, okay, that
Absolutely.
seems, yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Um, without a doubt. And him knowing what Kurt had eat, and then lined up with the autopsy, seeing that he was in the house. Once I learned that, the fact he was in the house, like it was over.
yeah, yeah. And what about you, Ben, when you heard it? Were you like, holy shit, I can't believe this is what happened? Or you're like, yeah, it seems about right.
The 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 thing that kind of floored me the most was like when I mentioned Bonnie earlier. Like I had no idea who that was. I was the only name that I remembered from that entire conversation. And so, when Joe's talking about it and I heard that name, I was like, I've heard that, but like it was really jarring. It was like I heard that name before, and now I hear somebody that is saying like, well, I was in the house and this happened, and he's literally naming somebody that Dylan did, and I'm like that. I mean, it was admittedly kind of hard to get through. Like it was pretty depressing, but no, I believe the majority of Joe's thing. There are
Yeah,
some parts that I'm still kind of confused about, some questions that I have, but all in all, I think he was definitely there.
definitely.
Um,
Yeah. Garrett, do you have anyone in your life that you've had an argument with, like who's like, no, like obviously he committed suicide, and you're like, no, like I can obviously he wasn't, or he didn't unalive himself, whatever we're supposed to say on YouTube. Has there been anybody that you've had to kind of, convince to look at the evidence?
Um, I talk to people, and some people that have been closer to me, I really tried to push the narrative just to be like, look, this is important. Look at the facts, look at the information. And then there's other people that didn't seem to care as much about it. Just people weren't as close to me friendship wise or anything. But I mean, I will gladly, you know, try to educate people and push them in the right direction. I've been sharing videos a little bit lately, and I think it's important that we get this stuff out to people and more people get the veil lifted. But
Absolutely. And I think, that's why we're really trying to work on the forensics so much, because people can argue with Joe or they can argue with whatever, but when you go like, yeah, okay, but like the exit chamber for the gun is here, and the shell casing's up here, like that's not possible. So I think when we have the forensics to kind of, tell people, I know somebody said, if you take 15 minutes and look into the forensics, you'll see that Kurt was murdered. And if you don't see that, then nobody can help you. There's this
so
like
Mm.
great bias, I think, that a lot of
that
people have. I think they
was
think it's romantic. So
that was
weird.
like the homicide unit, like called a suicide. Same day they show up, there's no
Yeah.
autopsy, no toxicology. You know, there was
Yeah.
money thrown around.
The forensic scientist we're working with too says the autopsy is the most ridiculous he's ever seen. It's a terrible,
Yeah.
shoddy
But
autopsy. So yeah, it's really bad. But what we're hoping is that, we'll have a complete crime scene reconstruction at some point. So, we'll know very close, between Joe's statement and the crime scene reconstruction, we'll get a really good sense of what happened to Kurt, which is, not easy, but I think that people deserve to know, and especially people who still think, we had somebody who did a copycat suicide just last year on April 5th. Because and left a note talking about Kurt. So the copycat suicides are still happening. So I think it's just really important that, for that alone that we change Kurt's narrative and give that back to him. Um, Ben, do you have people that you argue with and you're like, no, but like he didn't do that.
I've had a few. It was well earlier into, I think it was probably 95 or 96 when people were like, oh, come on, just let it go. Like, I know you like Nirvana, like we get it, but the guy, he did it, just let it go. And I remember showing several people from one of the thousands of pages of things that I printed off. Like I would bring them these things and like I had a highlighter like circling things and I'm like, but what about this? What about, and um there were a few people that were just like, okay, you're just being crazy. And I'm like, yeah, but you guys, you don't, it's like Garrett said. I think that some people, it was either you or Garrett. I'm sorry, I'm slow. But it seemed like people wanted to have that narrative that he did it to sort of romanticize the whole thing. Because if it's not a situation of like, oh, there's this tortured rock star. He was brilliant and he showed up and then quickly exited, all these things, and it just somehow changes the brilliance of what happened, like the body of work or whatever. And that's such a strange thing to think about that people would want to hold on to something like that, but just because they like the idea of this tragic rock star, when the fact of the matter is like Kurt was no different than any other musician that I've ever been around for the most part. I mean, really dedicated to what they're doing. They don't really take themselves too seriously. And of course, they're going to have, some problems like we all do. That's kind of why we write. But that doesn't mean that, I don't know, that whole thing kind of breaks my heart, especially in this age now where we have all these podcasts about, true crime stuff. And there's so many people who are obsessed with it. And they'll still kind of like, yeah, yeah, that's not, you know, I I don't understand it, but there have been a few people that have come around to it and they've been like and it makes them angry and it kind of makes me feel good in a way that they get like, right at that beginning part where they get just as angry as I was when I'm like they have to do something about this and like they're trying. But um no, my mom from like day one, she was like, there's no way. There's no way. I bet it was his wife. And I'm like, my mom's a pretty smart lady, I guess. So
That's
um,
amazing. Yeah, she has that mom instinct for sure. Where she would have told Kurt, like, yeah, don't marry her. Yeah,
oh
she's
yeah.
bad news for sure. Did either of you like Hole? Were you fans of Courtney's?
I was never really that big into whole. Um, I had gotten went through this on CD from Columbia House back when they had like 12 albums for a buck or something.
Mm.
So I wasn't like, oh, I gotta go get this album. Never saw them live. So I never had the pleasure of seeing her shitty guitar playing. I saw a video, one of her guitar techs put up a while ago. I don't know if you guys seen that.
Yeah, where
But
like yeah, she like didn't
isolated the
pay
guitar.
yeah, so bad.
I was like, man, how could she get away with that this long? I guess the same way she's been getting away with murder.
Yeah. I mean, she's talked tons of times on social media about how she put a bullet in Kurt's head. She's and she just I think it's like her Alice Cooper shtick, it's like, oh, that's my stage persona. I can be weird and like, just be whatever. But I mean, there's at least, 8, 9 times where she's, admitted that she murdered Kurt, and we're all just supposed to laugh about it and think that's just Courtney. But yeah, so it's I think I liked Toll a lot. I think even my first band, I kind of tried to sing like her, which means that I kind of tried to sing terribly. Um, and then I kind of found, like Tilt and like good, girl punk bands and figured out that was, Hole wasn't doing anything. But interestingly, when we were talking to Kristen Pfaff's biographer yesterday, and he was talking about how she really wanted to be in Hole because she thought she was going to make a difference, feminism wise. Of course, Kristen couldn't have known what was coming and what Courtney was capable of, I think, and how anti-feminist she really, I mean, I don't know if I'd go as far as misogyny, but perhaps, but definitely sexism. Yeah, exactly right. So yeah, so it's but hopefully this year, I mean, I feel like 2025 is going to be the year that we make some real progress. We've already, I think, now at least a lot of people know what we have a good idea as to what happened to Kurt. We don't know everything, but we have a really good idea. And thanks to Joe coming out and doing that, and now we actually have some real professionals working on it. Whereas for the last 30 years, nobody, we've had no medical professionals, no scientists, nothing working on this, and now we do. So, it's unfortunately they're working with very little evidence because, as we know, she had Kurt cremated 2 days after he was found, and she petitioned, I think about 8 years ago, she petitioned the Seattle police to destroy all the evidence that they still had. So she had her lawyer send in a letter saying, "We know you have evidence, on Kurt's death, and we want it all destroyed. Every photo, everything you have, we want it destroyed. And fortunately, the SPD said no. But we would have been in a situation where there literally was nothing to even, no photos, nothing. So at least that, that's our one saving grace is that they didn't do that. I'm sure because they knew people would be up in arms about it. So cool. Well, it was so
Dustin.
I know it's disgusting and I hope that, it's very well known. Okay, no, I shouldn't say that, but Courtney's also murdered animals. Like she
Sure.
murdered a family cat and a family dog and she broke her puppy's legs. Like, I mean, she was a kid when she did that, but as an adult with her ex-husband, he went to work one day and he got home and she had killed the cat and the dog. And she was going on her day as if that was totally a normal thing to do and that was fine. And so the people who stand up for Courtney now, even if they don't believe she hurt Kurt, it's like, I mean, are you kidding? Like, she's an awful person, and we also made a case when we sent things into the Seattle police, we made a case for domestic violence because we have at least, 24 reports of her hitting Kurt, pulling him by the ear, just like things that if Kurt had been a woman and she had been a man, this case would not have been ruled a suicide. We know that because, I think at the time, people just, especially in the 90s, people just didn't think men could be physically abused. And I know that's still a stigma today, but we have a lot of proof that she did abuse him. So we have that domestic violence piece in there as well. So, I'm hoping that when people really look into it and see the type of person that she is, they'll be able to understand how this happened. So yeah. So is there anything else that either of you wanted to add? It's been so much fun hanging out with you.
Well, I forget the head of the homicide unit for SPD, but
Cameron?
and yeah, not Detective Cameron, but the guy that ran the homicide unit, the older gentleman.
Oh, okay.
Um, yeah, I remember reading that he was accused of uh, another situation years back where he had been on the take and there was a homicide that had been made a suicide in the investigation. So apparently the guy had history of being a crook. So
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. The SPD was so corrupt,
and it
in the
goes on and
90s.
on and on.
Sure does. Yeah. I mean, and that's what we're hoping, is that it's a whole new, everybody in there is new, everybody's retired. We've
Right.
got a whole new set of, police officers who hopefully do want to do their job. And I did hear that even back in the day, about half the SPD thought Kurt committed suicide and half of them thought he was murdered. So even back then it was, something that they were throwing around or joking about, which is also, not cool. But yeah, and then, the other thing that we're doing is looking into see if we can bypass the Seattle police and go straight to the DA. So yeah, so
Okay.
hopefully we'll see some movement in 2025 and yeah. So cool. Okay, well thank you so much. And yeah, we'll talk to you both soon because I pester you both every day. So I'll talk to you both soon.
And just want to say real quick, thank you to you ladies for all your hard work and keep it up and good stuff.
Oh, thanks, Garrett. We so appreciate it. It's been so great meeting you and you too, Ben, obviously. Okay, so I'm just gonna end this right here.